My wife divorced me because she was tired of being the poorest couple in every room. She had no idea that the quiet man she was leaving already owned a $65 million private jet and that neither of us knew it yet. There was a period in my life when I believed the hardest thing a marriage could survive was running out of money. Years later, I realized I had been asking the wrong question. Money doesn't create character, it simply gives people more room to reveal who they already are. If stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary choices speak to you, consider subscribing to Secret Tales. Every week, we explore the quiet moments that change lives forever. Mine began with something as simple as an elderly woman and a broken compass on a damp Tuesday in Charleston, South Carolina. Marcus Bennett stood on a loading dock waiting for a delivery truck that was already 40 minutes late. The warehouse belonged to Harbor Marine Supply, a family owned business that repaired and stocked equipment for fishing boats, tugboats, and small commercial vessels. It wasn't glamorous work, but after 15 years, there Marcus knew every shelf, every wrench, and nearly every captain who walked through the doors. At 42, he had developed the habit of speaking softly even when everyone else was shouting. His co-workers joked that if the building ever caught fire, Marcus would probably ask the flames to calm down before reaching for an extinguisher. He smiled more than he laughed. He listened more than he talked. And somehow, despite earning little more than enough to cover rent, groceries, and the old medical bills left behind by his late father, he carried himself with a quiet dignity. That morning, his supervisor, Dale, stepped outside, rubbing his temples. Truck broke down again. Marcus shrugged. Driver says transmission. Dale sighed dramatically. I swear those folks treat maintenance like it's optional. Guess we'll have extra coffee time, Marcus said. You always find the bright side. I try. Dale looked toward the gray harbor. I used to. Marcus didn't answer. He had learned that some people only wanted someone beside them while they complained, not someone who fixed it. Across town, Emily Bennett adjusted the framed certificates hanging inside the real estate office where she had recently become a senior sales consultant. The promotion had changed her schedule. It had changed her clothes. It had changed the people who called her. Whether it had changed her was a question she never asked herself. Her new coworkers drove imported SUVs. Weekend conversations revolved around investment properties, ski vacations, luxury gyms, and networking dinners. At first, Emily felt intimidated. Then she started imitating. One afternoon, a coworker named Vanessa glanced at a photo on Emily's desk. Your husband. Emily smiled. Yeah, Marcus. What does he do? He works at Harbor Marine. Vanessa hesitated. Oh. Emily recognized that pause, the tiny pause people made before politely changing the subject. It embarrassed her a little more every week. Marcus never noticed. When Emily came home exhausted, he cooked dinner. When she studied new housing regulations late into the evening, he folded laundry. When her old Honda finally died, Marcus spent 3 weekends rebuilding the transmission himself because buying another vehicle simply wasn't possible. Emily thanked him, but gratitude slowly gave way to comparison. She watched husbands picking wives up in luxury cars. She watched expensive anniversary trips appear across social media. She watched coworkers receive designer handbags just because. Without realizing it, she stopped measuring Marcus by his kindness. She began measuring him by his lifestyle. One Saturday, Emily invited several colleagues to their apartment for dinner. Marcus cleaned every room twice. He borrowed folding chairs from their elderly neighbor. He spent all afternoon smoking ribs on a secondhand grill he'd repaired years earlier. The evening started well. People complimented the food. They laughed over stories from childhood. Marcus listened more than he spoke. Then the conversation drifted toward vacations. We're flying to Italy next month, one guest said. We're thinking Iceland, another replied. Vanessa smiled. My fiance insists commercial airlines are too much trouble. Someone laughed. So what private charter? She grinned. Sometimes. Everyone admired the idea. Emily stayed quiet. Then someone looked toward Marcus. What about you? Marcus wiped barbecue sauce from his hands. I've honestly never cared much about flying. Vanessa laughed lightly. That's one way of solving travel expenses. The room laughed politely. Marcus smiled too. Emily forced herself to smile, but inside something tightened. After everyone left, silence filled the apartment. Marcus stacked dishes. Emily stood at the kitchen window. Without turning around, she asked, "Does it bother you?" "What?" "That we're always the poorest people in every room." Marcus kept washing plates. "I've never counted." "I do." He dried his hands. "Emily." "No." She faced him. "You don't understand." "I might." "No, Marcus." Her voice remained calm, which somehow hurt more. "I'm tired." "Of what?" "Always settling." He looked confused. "We're paying bills. We're surviving. I thought surviving together mattered." "It used to." The words landed harder than shouting. Over the following months, tiny disagreements became permanent distance. Emily worked later. Marcus picked up overtime. Meals became microwave dinners eaten separately. Conversations shrank into practical questions. "Did you pay electric? Who's buying groceries? Your mother's birthday is Friday." Neither of them noticed how loneliness quietly occupied every empty chair in the apartment. Meanwhile, 300 miles away in Savannah, Georgia, 78-year-old Eleanor Whitmore sat inside the office of attorney Harold Price. She had no children, no surviving siblings, only memories. Harold placed another folder on the desk. "We've searched every record," he said. Eleanor smiled sadly. "I told you." "We finally found him." She looked up. "Marcus Bennett." Tears immediately filled her eyes. "My brother's grandson." Harold nodded. "He doesn't know your side of the family existed. He was only a baby when everyone separated." She reached for an old photograph, a young sailor holding an infant. "My brother would have wanted him found." Harold hesitated. "Mrs. Whitmore, there's something else." Decades earlier, Eleanor and her husband had quietly built Whitmore Aviation Leasing, a modest company that began by renting small cargo aircraft to coastal businesses. Over 40 years, it expanded steadily, not through flashy headlines, not through risky investments, just careful decisions and patient growth. By the time Eleanor retired, the company owned maintenance facilities, regional aircraft, and one custom-built Gulfstream business jet purchased primarily for executive travel. Its estimated value exceeded $65 million after taxes, trusts, and charitable foundations were arranged. Marcus Bennett had unknowingly become the sole remaining beneficiary. He had absolutely no idea because every attempt to locate him had failed until recently. Harold slid another envelope forward. "We should contact him." Eleanor gently shook her head. "Not yet. I'd like to meet him first." He frowned. "As yourself?" "Yes." "And tell him?" "No." Harold leaned back. "You're planning something." She smiled faintly. "I've spent 78 years learning who deserves responsibility." "You don't trust him." "I don't know him." She paused. "I'd rather discover his character before introducing his inheritance." Back in Charleston, Marcus arrived home carrying grocery bags. The apartment was unusually quiet. Emily sat at the dining table, several papers arranged neatly in front of her. Marcus recognized one document immediately, a divorce petition. He stared without speaking. Emily folded her hands. "I've already signed." He blinked. "You already decided?" "I've been deciding for months." He sat down slowly. "Did I do something?" "No." "Then help me understand." She looked away. "I don't want this life anymore." "Our life." "Our limitations." Marcus searched her face. "I thought we faced them together." "I don't." Silence, long enough to hear the refrigerator humming. Finally, Marcus asked quietly, "Is there someone else?" Emily closed her eyes. "I've been seeing someone." He nodded once, not angrily, not dramatically, just once. "As long as we're honest." "I'm sorry." "I believe you are." She looked surprised. "You aren't yelling?" "I don't think yelling changes truth." A single tear rolled down Emily's cheek. That almost broke him, not because she cried, but because he still wanted to comfort the person who was leaving him. The divorce finalized 6 weeks later. Marcus kept almost nothing. The apartment lease ended. Emily moved into a newer condominium with Daniel, a financial consultant she'd met through work. Marcus rented a small room above an elderly couple's garage. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained. The heater barely worked. Yet somehow the quiet felt easier than pretending everything was fine. One rainy afternoon, an elderly woman entered Harbor Marine carrying a broken brass compass. Marcus greeted her. "Can I help you?" "I hope so." She smiled warmly. "My late husband's compass." He examined it carefully. "The spring's worn out." "Can it be repaired?" "It deserves to be." She laughed. "That's an unusual answer." "So's an unusual compass." So he spent nearly 40 minutes restoring it. When he finished, he refused payment. "It belonged to your husband." "So I'd feel wrong charging sentimental value." She watched him closely. "You remind me of someone." "My dad said people usually mean that when they're getting older." She burst into laughter. "So they do." He smiled. "I'm Marcus." "I know." He blinked. "You do." "I've heard good things." "Hopefully true." "Mostly." For the next several weeks, Eleanor visited often, sometimes with old navigation equipment, sometimes with stories, sometimes simply for conversation. Marcus assumed she was lonely. She assumed nothing. She observed how he treated customers, how he treated coworkers, whether kindness disappeared when nobody important was watching. It never did. She watched a boat captain storm in one afternoon furious about a part that had arrived cracked, and heard the man raise his voice until half the warehouse went quiet. Marcus didn't raise his back. He apologized, replaced the part at no charge, and walked the captain to his truck, talking about the man's daughter, whose name he somehow remembered. When the captain drove off, he was smiling. Eleanor, pretending to study a shelf of brass fittings, wrote nothing down. She didn't need to. Another day, she asked Marcus offhand whether he ever resented the people who had more than he did. He considered it honestly. "For a while," he admitted. "Then I noticed the resenting cost me more than they did, so I stopped paying for it." Eleanor turned the sentence over on the drive home, the way she used to turn over a promising contract, and decided it was the truest thing anyone had said to her in years. One afternoon, she intentionally left her wallet on the counter. Marcus drove 25 minutes after work to return it. She answered the door smiling. "I wondered how long it would take." "You knew." "I suspected." "You could have called." "I wanted to see if you'd come." He laughed. "You planned this." "Maybe." He shook his head. "You remind me of my grandmother." "I'll accept that as a compliment." A week later, Eleanor invited Marcus to lunch. Halfway through the meal, she asked, "If someone handed you more money than you could spend in a lifetime, what would you do?" Marcus thought for nearly a minute. "I'd pay Dale enough to retire." She smiled. "And Biz, fix my church roof. And Bud, set up scholarships for trade schools. You wouldn't buy a mansion? I barely like cleaning one bathroom." She laughed so loudly nearby, diners turned around. Then she became quiet. "What if your life changed tomorrow?" Marcus stirred his tea. "It already has." "How?" "I learned people can stop loving you." Eleanor looked at him with unexpected sadness. "And yet you don't sound bitter." "I've tried bitterness." "How was it?" "Heavy." She nodded slowly. "Very heavy." 3 days later, Harold Price called asking Marcus to visit his office regarding an important family matter. Marcus almost ignored the message, assuming it was another insurance scam. But Eleanor called that evening. "You should go." "You know about it." "I do." "Is something wrong?" She smiled gently through the phone. "No." Then she added words that left Marcus staring silently into the darkness. "I believe you're finally about to meet a part of your family you never knew existed." Marcus barely slept that night. He replayed Eleanor's words over and over. "A part of your family you never knew existed." He searched through an old box of photographs his father had left behind years earlier. Most of the pictures were faded birthday parties, fishing trips, a Christmas morning when he was too young to remember. Tucked between two photographs was an old postcard with a single handwritten sentence on the back. "Someday you'll understand why family is more complicated than blood." His father had never explained what he meant. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Harold Price's law office, feeling completely out of place. The receptionist welcomed him with a warm smile. "Mr. Bennett, they're expecting you." When he stepped into the conference room, Eleanor was already there. She stood slowly and smiled. "I'm glad you came." Marcus looked from her to Harold. "I feel like everyone knows something except me." Harold motioned toward a chair. "I suppose that's true." After Marcus sat down, Harold opened a thick folder. Mr. Bennett, through extensive genealogical research, we've confirmed that Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore is your great aunt, your grandfather's sister. Marcus stared at Eleanor. You've known this all along. She nodded. I wanted to know you before introducing myself as family. You tested me. I observed you. Marcus expected to feel offended. Instead, he felt strangely relieved. You fixed my compass. You returned my wallet. He shook his head. You never treated me differently because of who I was. Marcus smiled. I didn't know who you were. Exactly. Harold continued. Mrs. Whitmore owns the majority of Whitmore Aviation Leasing. She has chosen to transfer ownership according to the family trust. Marcus frowned. I don't understand. You are now the primary beneficiary. Harold slid several documents across the table. Marcus looked at the numbers once, then again. I think there's a mistake. There isn't. My entire life, I've made less than $50,000 a year. I know. There are too many zeros. Harold smiled gently. Most people say that. Marcus looked at Eleanor. Why me? Because your grandfather would have chosen you. I never even met him. But I have met you. For nearly 2 hours, Harold explained the business. The company leased aircraft to corporations, emergency medical providers, and humanitarian organizations. It wasn't a glamorous empire. It was a well-managed business built over decades. Among its assets was a custom Gulfstream business jet worth approximately $65 million. Marcus stared at a photograph. So I own this? Harold nodded. You do. Marcus laughed nervously. I've spent years comparing airline ticket prices. Eleanor laughed with him. And now you own an aircraft you've never seen? The weeks that followed felt surreal. Marcus hired financial advisors, accountants, and legal experts not to show off, but because he knew what he didn't know. Whenever someone asked why he wasn't making extravagant purchases, he answered honestly, I've been poor too long to waste money pretending I wasn't. He kept living in the small garage apartment while he learned how the company actually operated. He visited mechanics before executives. He spent hours talking with pilots, dispatchers, cleaners, and office assistants. One senior mechanic pulled him aside. You know, most new owners never come down here. Marcus smiled. Neither did my toolbox. What? I started with tools. The mechanic grinned. I think we're going to get along. Word of that spread through the hangar faster than any memo. Within a month, people who had braced for a stranger in an expensive suit were instead teaching the new owner how to read a maintenance log and finding that he actually listened. Meanwhile, rumors spread quickly. Emily first heard Marcus's name during a networking luncheon. One of her clients casually mentioned Whitmore Aviation. They've got a new owner. Oh, apparently some ordinary warehouse worker inherited the company. Emily laughed politely. What was his name? The client checked his phone. Marcus Bennett. Her smile disappeared. Excuse me? Funny story, really? Nobody even knew he existed. Emily's coffee cup nearly slipped from her hand. That evening she searched online. There it was. A local business journal featured a photograph of Marcus standing beside Eleanor and several longtime employees. The headline read, Whitmore Aviation announces family successor focused on employees and community investment. No flashy cars, no designer suits, just Marcus, wearing the same simple smile she had seen for years. Daniel noticed her expression. Everything okay? She quietly turned the laptop toward him. His eyebrows rose. Your ex? She nodded. So he's wealthy now. She looked away. I don't think that's the point. Over the next few months, Marcus surprised everyone. Instead of cutting staff to increase profits, he introduced profit-sharing bonuses after consulting company leadership. He expanded apprenticeship programs for young mechanics. He funded scholarships at technical colleges. He modernized safety equipment before renovating executive offices. When reporters asked why, Marcus answered simply, if the people doing the work aren't thriving, neither is the business. Employees repeated that quote for weeks, not because it sounded impressive, but because he meant it. One Saturday morning, Marcus drove to Harbor Marine. Dale was sweeping outside. You look different. Marcus laughed. I shaved. No. Dale smiled. You look lighter. I feel lighter. You quitting? Marcus hesitated. I have to. Dale nodded. I figured. Marcus handed him an envelope. I wanted you to have this. Dale opened it slowly. Inside was the deed to a small fishing cabin overlooking the marshes. I can't accept this. You can, Marcus smiled. You once told me you dreamed of retiring there. I was joking. I wasn't. Dale's eyes filled with tears. You've always been a better man than this place deserved. Marcus shook his head. No, it just taught me how to become one. Months passed before Marcus saw Emily again. It happened at a neighborhood charity fundraiser benefiting families recovering from hurricane damage. Neither expected the encounter. She approached cautiously. Hi, Marcus smiled politely. Emily, I wasn't sure you'd remember me. I don't forget people. An awkward silence settled between them. Finally, she spoke. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do. She looked at the ground. I convinced myself money was the reason I wasn't happy. Marcus listened without interrupting. It wasn't, she said. I kept thinking if life looked more successful, I'd feel more successful. And Miss, I was wrong. She explained that her relationship with Daniel had ended months earlier, not because of Marcus, but because she discovered she had been chasing an image instead of building a life. I hurt you. Yes, I'll regret that forever. Marcus looked at the volunteers carrying food boxes across the parking lot. For a long time, I kept wondering what I'd done wrong. You love me, Emily whispered. He looked back at her. Eventually, I realized loving someone isn't always enough to make them stay. She nodded through tears. No, and it isn't enough to make them come back either. Emily understood. He wasn't angry. He simply wasn't waiting anymore. Before leaving, she asked quietly, Can I ask one question? Of course. When we were married, if you'd known about the inheritance, would you have told me? Marcus thought carefully. Yes, immediately. Probably after I figured out what half the paperwork meant. She laughed through her tears. That sounds like you. He smiled. I don't think keeping secrets makes relationships stronger. Emily nodded. I wish I'd understood that before I started keeping my own. As she walked away, Marcus felt something unexpected. Not victory, not satisfaction, peace. The conversation had closed a chapter that had remained unfinished for too long. Forgiveness, he realized, wasn't pretending the past hadn't happened. It was deciding the past no longer deserved control over the future. A year later, Whitmore Aviation celebrated its 50th anniversary. Employees gathered inside the largest maintenance hangar. Mechanics stood beside executives. Pilots stood beside receptionists. No reserved seating. Marcus insisted everyone eat together. Near the end of the celebration, Eleanor asked him to say a few words. He walked to the microphone. I've been told this company owns aircraft worth millions of dollars. The audience laughed. But I don't think that's what makes this place valuable. He looked across the room. I spent most of my life believing wealth meant having more than other people. He paused. Now I think real wealth is having people who trust you when they don't have to. Silence filled the hangar. When I first arrived here, many of you took a chance on someone who knew almost nothing about aviation. A mechanic shouted, You learned fast. Everyone laughed. Marcus grinned. I had good teachers. He looked toward Eleanor. And one remarkable aunt who taught me something before she ever told me we were family. Eleanor smiled. Character is easier to recognize before money enters the room. The audience applauded. Later that evening, Marcus stood alone beside the sleek Gulfstream jet, parked beneath the golden sunset. Its polished surface reflected the sky like a mirror. Reporters often assumed it was his favorite possession. The truth was, he rarely flew on it. To Marcus, it wasn't a trophy. It was simply another responsibility entrusted to him. He ran a hand along the aircraft's smooth exterior and smiled to himself. There had been a time when he didn't even know it existed, but discovering he owned a private jet had never been the greatest surprise of his life. The greatest surprise was learning that the quiet values he practiced when he believed he had nothing were the very qualities that prepared him to handle everything, and in the end that inheritance proved far more valuable than any airplane ever could. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. And if you enjoy heartfelt stories about ordinary people facing life's extraordinary moments, Don't forget to subscribe to Secret Tales.